Good evening, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. This is the February 13th, 2023 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Can we have the roll?
Andre Spinelli.
Here.
Jared Gardner.
Here.
Radhika Krishna.
Here.
Jim Winchester.
Here.
Scott Pullis.
Here.
Jeff Ron.
Here.
Brandy Eber.
Here.
You have a quorum. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess next item on the agenda are the minutes from January 18th. Is there a motion to approve? Motion by Commissioner Pullis, seconded by Commissioner Krishna. Any objection? Seeing none, that motion passes. Moving on to disclosures. Commissioner Eber?
No disclosures.
Commissioner Pullis?
No disclosures?
Commissioner Winchester?
No disclosures.
Commissioner Krishna?
No disclosures.
Commissioner Spinelli?
No disclosures.
Commissioner Ron?
No disclosures.
And no disclosures for myself. That brings us to our public hearing item, just one. And before we get to the first item, I'll read the procedure by which the public may speak to the commission at its meetings. After the staff presentation is completed on public hearing items, the chair will ask for public testimony on the issue. Persons who wish to testify will follow the time limits established in the commission rules of procedure. Petitioners, including all of his or her representatives, will receive 10 minutes. Part of this time may be reserved for rebuttal. Representatives of groups, community councils, PTAs, etc. will receive 5 minutes. Individuals receive 3 minutes. When your testimony is complete, you may be asked questions by the commission. You may only testify once on any issue unless questioned by the commission. Any party of interest wishing to appeal shall first file with the planning director within 7 days of the commission's decision made on the record a written notice of intent to appeal in accordance with AMC 2103-050A.4.a. Commission recommendations to the Anchorage Assembly are not appealable. Following approval of the written findings of fact and decision, any party of interest may, within 20 days, file an appeal by filing a notice of appeal and paying the appeal fee and deposit in accordance with Section 2103.050. The notice of appeal must be filed with the planning director on a form prescribed by the municipality. If the appellant is not the applicant, the appellant's notice of appeal shall include proof of service on the applicant. And with that, our first item is case 2023-0011. Can we hear a report from staff?
Yes, thank you, Chair Gardner. So this is an ordinance to amend Anchorage Municipal Code Title 21 for site access. The Commission held a work session last week regarding the staff report in attachments 1 through 4. Please reference supplementary packet number 1 that was emailed on February 10th. That is additional written follow-up to questions that we received at the work session. We also received a written comment this morning that has been provided to the Commission in supplementary packet number 2. Tom Davis and I are here tonight on behalf of the Planning Department to answer any additional questions. As a quick review, the proposed Title 21 Site Access Amendment comprised 4 main recommendations to create an urban neighborhood context area, improve site access for pedestrians and alternative transportation, right-size driveway, alley access, and on-site circulation requirements, and consolidate and simplify regulations. This project carries out Implementation Action 4.6 of the Anchorage 2040 Land Use Plan as part of Goal 4 Neighborhood Housing and its associated Action 7.2 as part of Goal 7 Compatible Land Use. These code amendments also support other Title 21 projects and actions that seek to achieve the goals of the 2040 Land Use Plan. These code changes are proposed to increase pedestrian requirements throughout the municipality, even in those areas outside of the urban context. The urban neighborhood map is simple to follow and offers flexibility. For example, the higher standard for alley access in urban neighborhoods does not make sense to apply in the outlying neighborhoods. Applying the same standard muni-wide would miss an opportunity to make an even greater change in the urban neighborhoods. There are 3 approval criteria for amendments to Title 21. They are 1, the proposed amendment will promote the public health, safety, and general welfare. 2, the proposed amendment is consistent with the comprehensive plan and the stated purposes of Title 21. And 3, the proposed amendment is necessary or desirable because of changing conditions, new planning concepts, or other social or economic conditions. The department finds all 3 criteria are met and recommends approval, not approval, but recommends that the commission recommend approval to the assembly, along with the 11 amendments to the public hearing draft identified in the staff report on pages 10, 11, and 12. The amendments either respond to public comments or are non-substantive clarifications and corrections. Recommended findings for the commission's consideration are on page 13 of the staff report. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. I guess I'll open up to commission for comments or questions, if anyone has any, before we just open the public hearing. Commissioner Ron.
Thank you through the chair, Ms. Appleby. Thank you for the quick recap. I'd appreciate the department's perspective or sharing their perspective on public comments in supplementary packet number 2 that we have before us. And the specific item of interest that I have is around the recommendation to not go with an overlay, but instead rely on the zoning districts to act as the lever for change.
Yes, through the chair. So the public comment is to, instead of creating the map within the code, to use the zoning districts as a means of identifying where urban or pedestrian-oriented standards would be located. Currently in Title 21, standards for windows or pedestrian-oriented type development features apply the same area-wide through the current development standards. The current lineup of zoning districts doesn't really work to be able to identify areas where the municipality, the community would like to see the highest pedestrian-oriented standards. What the map does within the code, it creates the opportunity to create flexibility in the code to be able to tailor standards for different urban environments. So there is a difference between, like the Fairview or South Addition, between that and areas that are zoned similarly in other parts of the bowl. But it is a challenging issue, and we appreciate the comment, and ideally you would have a lineup of zoning districts and a zoning map which would enable that to occur. And eventually that is the ultimate vision of the land use plan map. We looked at the current lineup of zoning districts, and for example, the idea of using more of the intense zoning districts, like the higher density residential multifamily, or the commercial zoning districts, and identifying the current one-size-fits-all standards, apply the higher standard to those. And what we found is that for example, some of the that would leave out some of the neighborhoods in South Addition and in neighborhoods like Airport Heights, which are also very kind of urbanist and walkable, transit corridor near downtown. Some of these areas are actually zoned R1 or R2D, or some of the lower districts. And so the challenge is that we would be using this sort of the hodgepodge zoning districts, which weren't really designed to recognize these neighborhoods. Meanwhile, you have areas zoned R3, R2M, and outlying areas. Like I think of areas in Chugiak Eagle River, South Anchorage, that may be zoned R2M or R3, but they're not near public transit, or they're lower density. It's really challenging with the current lineup of zoning districts. We have areas B3 Main Street, that's Bernard Road and Fairview. Meanwhile, we have B3, along Brayton Drive and, and the Seward Highway, We have B3 along Eagle River Road. A lot of these areas were area-wide rezonings in the 80s and the 70s. What we're recommending is that we recognize these urban neighborhoods now in the code as opposed to what several current current existing Title 21 standards are doing. They're taking applicants to the Anchorage 2040 land use plan map rendition of these neighborhoods, and to recommend putting it in the code, make it easier to use now. But ultimately, that using zoning districts is the ultimate objective. We have Action 3-5 in 2040. It calls for creating better mixed-use zoning for our town centers. We have actions in 2040 calling for what we call in the parlance of planning called form-based codes for Fairview and the urban neighborhoods. And these kinds of changes do involve more time, resources, money, and we would recommend that going with this map now doesn't take away from those goals or opportunities. And we want to make sure that to convey that we're not leaving the other areas behind, that actually this amendment is actually increasing the pedestrian-oriented standards that already exist in what we call the other areas. It doesn't refer to them as suburban, and it for example, it increases the pedestrian-oriented site planning, street-facing building orientation for commercial buildings, and it standardizes and essentially strengthens the standard for multifamily buildings to avoid most of the parking being in front of the building. I want to point out that there are areas, lastly, that there are areas outside of the urban neighborhood context that, such as downtown Anchorage, downtown Eagle River, Girdwood zoning districts. These districts are not included in the urban neighborhood context, and they're examples of districts that they're not being left behind. They just have their own zoning and actually have even higher standards. So we recognize that concern, and we've run by the zoning plan review folks, other folks. Is this map difficult to use? Is this going to be difficult? Is this going to be challenging? And over again, this amendment creates an easier code. But we do ultimately recognize the goal to use zoning districts. It's just the current lineup of zoning districts doesn't work.
And I think Tom provided a good answer. I just wanted to summarize a couple things. So code right now refers to the 2040 land use plan. Like Tom said, this would create the map within code, and it would give flexibility to respond to different neighborhood characteristics. Like Tom said, the current zoning districts don't work to define an area where we would want higher pedestrian standards. So he gave a few examples where, for instance, parts of Government Hill and South Addition are R2D. We talked about during the work session how B3 is in urban and in semi-rural areas across the municipality. Tom had mentioned the ultimate goal is to create new zones or maybe even an overlay zone, but that would take a much larger action, that possibly even years before that's done, whereas this map, we can increase the pedestrian standards throughout the municipality, increase them in the areas we know that are urban, and do that now. Lastly, I just wanted to mention that we also thought there was a practical limitation with the cost to implement these if we would up the standard muni-wide. So say if we would require the alley access from South Anchorage. I had alluded to that, but I didn't, I guess, explicitly mention a practical costs that we think could inhibit housing development potentially. That's all I wanted to add to response to that.
Okay, I've got nothing else in the queue, so we'll go ahead and open this up for public comment. I don't know if you're... Don't see anyone coming forward to speak, so we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. And I'll look for the commission on what it's interested in doing in this case. Commissioner Ron.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. I move in case 2023-0011 to recommend to the Anchorage Assembly approval of the public hearing draft Title 21 text amendment to the site access regulations, subject to staff's recommendations on pages 10 through 12 and findings on page 13 of the staff report.
Thank you, Commissioner Ron. Your motion is seconded by Commissioner Krishna. Commissioner Ron, would you like to speak to your motion?
Just briefly, thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank again staff for the thorough and in my opinion, good work done in holding a work session, responding to commissioner comments, providing greater context than perhaps was initially envisioned in what you came forward with, but really hit the mark in a lot of areas. I now, as a commissioner, better understand how this fits within a greater context of the direction in which we're looking to head. I agree with the department's recommended findings 1 through 9, and Ms. Appleby, I appreciate your comments around the objectives of increasing pedestrian standards throughout the community, and doing that now, but while also achieving flexibility where we're able. I do recognize we received a late comment from a member of the public, and I have confidence in the planning department's response that this action does not preclude the future use of zoning districts when improved to affect this and similar changes as well. So thank you, that's all I have.
I'll just add briefly as well, I also really appreciate the work that went into this. It was clear the process, I think, worked well, and there was a lot of public input that was taken into account. I think the ultimate result was a good balance of the interest at stake and is a good step in the right direction. I wanted to note that I do recognize too that there's kind of a balance also that needs to be struck between making changes that can be done easily and efficiently and effectively, while also still trying to have them be broad as appropriate to meet kind of the bigger picture goals of the municipality. And sometimes finding that right balance is tough. I think you did a good job here. And I just wanted to add on the record in response to one of your comments to a commissioner question about looking into evaluating the TIA regulations and potentially finding ways to make it more inclusive of other modes of transportation. I liked that recommendation, and I just wanted to put on the record that I would support efforts to do that when appropriate in the future. Thank you. Okay, seeing nothing further, we'll go ahead and call the vote. Seven votes in favor, that motion passes. So the sole remaining agenda here is, just looking for a motion to adjourn. Motion by Commissioner Spinelli, seconded by Commissioner Eber. Seeing no objection, we are adjourned. Thank you.